Two-Face, Rape of Cassandra. Audio excerpt of Book 4, read by the author. Have I missed the mark, or am I a prophet of lies, a babbler from door to door? Cassandra, Aeschylus, Agamemnon, 1194. Chapter 1. Dawn at Cervi 319. I'm going to go straight out there from my house in the morning. I will be at that 319 as well and run the 1129 if you want. Chris Watts' text message to co-worker Cody Roberts on Sunday, August 12th at 17:06. At 06:10 the sun lifts over the rim of a remote field somewhere in Colorado. Darkness dissipates. Blinding light replaces it, turning green to gilded flame. Phew! A mountain bluebird sits on a fence post, enjoying the cool first light of a summer's day. On the edge of its thin bill are the small insect entrails of breakfast, a fly. Phew! The light spools over everything. Barbed wire in morning sun burns like veins of gold before reverting back to barbed wire. What is barbed wire except a series of lines holding back the sky, holding out animals, predators, and trespassers? What are fence lines across countrysides except a symptom of man not holding back the wilderness, but overwhelming it? Softly, infrequently, the bluebird calls to the whispering prairie grass. Phew! The new sky of a new day shines in its black eyes. Its blue feathers glow in the burnish of a bright orange dawn. 20 minutes after sunrise, a slow noise breaks the peace of the country morning. The bluebird turns its thin bill towards the sound. The little bird sees a cloud rising over twittering grass heads. Sunflowers bob merrily in the foreground as a 7-mile-per-hour breeze floats over its blue wings, pulling at the green grasses. The far-off moan of a pickup rises a notch as it tilts over a ridge and into the little bird's line of sight. Phew! As the work truck approaches, the sound of tires gripping the gravel grows louder than the engine. Phew! The bluebird cocks its head, glances briefly back where it thought it spied a grasshopper, then, at the last moment, abandons its post on the Cervi ranch fence and flutters low over the ground in search of another perch and another grasshopper. The silver fox's Super Duty lariat crunches to a stop. Chris Watts, wearing a black shirt, opens the door and moves swiftly. He jogs to the green barrier, steps on the metal grill, unlocks and opens the gate. Then he drives through, gets out, closes and locks the gate behind him once more. The lariat kicks up a small cloud as it makes its way with mute urgency to the battery. It's 06:27 on August 13. Troy McCoy arrives at the Anadarko office in Platteville from his home in Greeley. McCoy is more than a co-worker, he's a friend, and the only operator Watts got to buy into Thrive. If today was a day like any other day, where McCoy is now, Platteville is about half as far from Frederick as it is from Greeley, what should also be there. But it isn't a day like any other, especially not for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. For them, August the 13th is the first day in an eternity of days they will never get to see, feel, or live because of this man. Watts is a numbers guy. As he calmly directs the nose of the lariat, he's crunching them. The former rover, now field coordinator, knows all too well the vehicle's GPS tracking is feeding his every movement in real time to the platform hub. That's okay. I'm exactly where I need to be. I just need to stick inside the numbers. The question is, where's Roberts? The platform hub is where Chris Watts usually is on a Monday morning at this time. He'll spend an hour at the hub in the morning, getting briefed with the other operators, and then spend the rest of the day on the fields. Usually he's all over the place throughout the day, but he's usually not out on the field first thing. And no one likes Cervi 319 because it's so fucking far out. Despite everything, he's bang on time pretty much, except this morning. Except this morning he's bang on time 47 miles away from where he usually is, and with some important business on the side to take care of. Behind those black eyes is a woman, and he's thinking of her when he parks the truck beside tanks number 17697 and 17698. He reaches for his phone, finds the number for Cody Roberts. Once this part is done, he can get back to the office where she is, and it will all be over. All of it is almost behind them. Today is the fresh start they've both been dreaming of. But there's one important errand left to run as regards Shanann and the kids. 0631. Where you at? Where Roberts is will give him an idea how much time he has. He waits for an answer. It's cool out, 53 Fahrenheit, 11 Celsius, with a slight breeze blowing. Phew! And a bluebird is singing. Phew! 1 minute later, Roberts responds. 0632. Just got fuel in Kersey. Phew! Watts knows he has at least half an hour to play with, assuming Roberts is on his way from Kersey straight to Cervi 319. Straight to Cervi 319 means either an upside-down R through Keensburg to Roggan, and then up through the Cervi ranch gates, or riding in a slanted J along Highway 34 and the South Platte East, before taking the restricted access roads through the Gutterson Ranch south towards Roggan. But half an hour is cutting it fine. He needs more time. So Watts texts Roberts back. 0633. Okay, I'm in Cervi. Separate message, but also at 0633. Where are you going first? 0633. DPC state. 0634. Watt sends a thumbs up emoji and gets to work. With all the sensors at the site taken care of, he places his phone in his pocket, reaches into the rear cabin of the pickup, pushes aside a heavy toolbox and tools on the seat, and removes the ears of a grey, blue, and white bedsheet to reveal a small pile of corpses wrapped in oil-black garbage bags. Right then, 2 more messages come through from 22-year-old Cody Roberts. Watts retrieves the phone from his trouser pocket. 0635. I need to call Chad and see if he plans on still stoking the 1029 out there to see if it'll pump up. 0635. If so, I'll have to meet him, or he will have to get the cannon plugs from Tony K. Watts needs to stop this from becoming a conversation. His next message is part response, part sign-off. 0635. Okay, let me know before I leave here. He puts the phone back in his pocket. He quickly pans around him, but sees nothing. Coast is clear. He removes the smallest body first, opens the bag and douses her in gasoline. Then, still wrapped in a garbage bag, he carries her stiff corpse not against his body, but away from him, as if holding a large rotting fish. Quickly scales the metal stairs, his boots making soft tink, tink, tink noises as he goes. 3 minutes later, at 0638, Roberts texts him, then sends 2 more at 0659. During this time, Watts scales the metal stairs 3 times. Watts doesn't answer any of these messages. Instead, at around the time the first unanswered text comes through, he's holding both Cece's little paws in one hand while using his other hand to remove the bag and flip open the thief hatch. Once open, a hot, noxious vapor assails him. The mask protects his nostrils and airways, but he can still feel the toxic gust burning his skin and making his ears prickle. It invigorates him. It's exactly what he needs, once. To make them all dissolve, disappear, vanish. As he drops Cece down into the cauldron feet first, her hips snag on the sides of the hatch. With pressure on her shoulders, a few steady twists and turns, and the raging chemicals already softening her skin from below, she soon slips through. He seals the hatch, glances around him, and then scans the area around the tanks for anyone coming. All clear. 1 down, 2 to go. That was Chapter 1 of Book 4 in the definitive Two-Face series. Rape of Cassandra, Book 4 in the Two-Face series, was published on December 16th, less than a month after the release of the Discovery documents. On the cover, for the first time, artifacts appeared above the title of Le-Vel and Anadarko. In Chapter 1, I opened up the narrative at Cervi 319. This was deliberate. So was the use of the bluebird and the repetition of its plaintive call. Through this symbolism of light and dark, of the vibrant but fragile blue of life juxtaposed against the black of garbage bags and oil, I wanted to sketch a symbolic portrait using the fabric of the landscape and the textures of this case. I do think Watts taking the bodies of his families out into the field and burying his own flesh and blood within the remote oil infrastructure of the company that employed him and where the love of his life also worked speaks symbolically of a larger rape of our society in Colorado and also beyond. If people were confused about the To Pollyanna's title, there's probably even more confusion about Rape of Cassandra. What did that mean? Rape of Cassandra is code for Anadarko's fracking activities, especially in Colorado. The rushed plea deal seemed suspicious to me then and now, but it wasn't only that. It was the slick way the court cases were coordinated with voting days and how elegantly the DA's office danced around the media. The timing was strategic and clever, as if far greater interests were in play, which of course they were. Anadarko, as it existed in 2018, incidentally, no longer exists as the same entity today, just a few months later in 2019. The company has since merged with Occidental in a huge, almost unprecedented multi-billion-dollar deal. Given these interests, Weld County and Anadarko couldn't afford the ruinous PR of a high-profile trial, and they made sure the spotlight never shone too bright. When the Watts case started cycling through the media, I'm talking about in the early months of August, September, October, I predicted that we would likely see a similar outcome to the John Benet Ramsey case. Not an outcome in terms of, how can I put it, no outcome or no investigation or no kind of denouement, but a scenario where the case simply doesn't make it to trial. There were people in Colorado who thought this notion was absurd, and they thought they knew the mechanisms better because they lived there and they were locals. The reasons behind the John Benet Ramsey case not going to trial and there not being a trial are broadly similar, but they're not exactly the same. There were other issues at stake, but what is similar, at least from a faraway vantage point, is that the Ramseys were involved in a enterprise that had national strategic value to America, and of course I'm talking about Lockheed Martin. So at the time, John Ramsey was a vice president, not like the only vice president, one of probably dozens, but he was nevertheless a vice president of Lockheed Martin. And it seemed as if someone decided it was in the nation's interest that attention not be directed to sensitive national interests. And while writing the series of books on John Benet, it seemed incredible and even just hard to believe that the murder of a little girl in a basement could rock the foundations of America in that way. And some may say that that's still not likely. If we look at this case and we look at the unusual way that it didn't make it to trial, and the fact that the death penalty would have probably been irrelevant anyway, so to take a plea deal when it was irrelevant to getting the death penalty is kind of a mindfuck. It's just it's an excuse in lieu of no other explanation, or no other explanation that can be given. So we know for a fact that the major revenue streams for Weld County come from oil and gas. We know that Anadarko are at the center of this case because of the two employees and also because of where the bodies were buried. Anyway, let's move on from that particular point. In the first chapter, I think it's clear the knowledge base has expanded in leaps and bounds compared to the first three narratives. So, for example, for the first time when Rape of Cassandra was published, there was information made available about the autopsies, for example. As useful as the information was, it was also strangely kind of muted. There was, I've written about so many true crime cases. The autopsy evidence in this one was almost non-existent. There were no defensive wounds on Shanann. There were virtually no injuries to speak of whatsoever on Shanann. That's just Shanann. And then with the children, there was also very little to go on. And there was also no obvious mechanical cause of death based on the autopsy. One of the mysteries that were lingering until the release of the discovery documents was how the children were placed inside the containers, the oil containers. True Crime Rocket Science was one of the first to say both that it was possible to put them through the thief hatch, but also unlikely without causing damage to their bodies. So, for example, you wouldn't just easily be able to fit them through. It was maybe unlikely, but he wouldn't have had time for the alternative. And this led to some speculation on True Crime Rocket Science that if they had been dropped through the thief hatch at the top, the bodies had to have been processed in some way. In other words, treated chemically or softened in some way that they would easily pass through. This hasn't been excluded, but it seems like it was not necessarily likely. In any event, the discovery also didn't provide very clear information on this particular aspect. If family dynamics was a key and crucial area of investigation and interrogation in Two Pollyannas, then the work vibe sort of came to the fore to a great extent in this particular narrative. What were the dynamics between the employer and the employees? What were the dynamics between the employees amongst themselves? And that's certainly an area that I revisited in later narratives, and that proved to be very useful to figuring out what is going on in Watts's head. What does working at a mostly male industry do to the mindset of a father and a husband? What does the mindset of a man who is surrounded by other male workers in a very sort of gritty industry with a very sort of macho, masculine mindset, and then there's a attractive woman in the office. I've put up a video previously asking whether people thought Shanann was more attractive than Nicole Kessinger. I don't think a lot of the people answering are thinking about Nicole Kessinger working in sort of a male-dominated work environment and what sort of comments men would make and the whole sort of energy and electricity in a situation like that. So in terms of the book 4, it was important to sketch the sights and sounds, not only of Anadarko, but not really to dramatize. I'm talking about the first chapter, not so much to dramatize the scene, but to bring it to life, to bring to life the deaths of these people. Whenever we see Shanann in a video, she seems resurrected. It seems like she's still alive, like we're talking about her almost just in a third person. Whenever we see a picture of her, she seems resurrected. Whenever we see the video of the children, I think the part that's missing from our minds and from attitudes, I guess, to this case is that where Shanann and the children are right now. Their bodies no longer exist. Shanann is no longer with us. She's part of the dust of a graveyard in North Carolina. That's where she is now. That's the reality. And those photos that we see of the family is just a moment. They're just simply moments caught in time, and that's not reality. Those photos we're looking at aren't reality, and so it was important for me to try to sketch that reality. In a more general sense, I want to say that there is something about construction and industry and corporate companies and just people who work in sales and breaking the earth that seems to lend itself to thoughts of murder. I've already mentioned with John Benet Ramsey, you've got this association with this huge mega machine in the corporate entity of Lockheed Martin. Of course, John Ramsey didn't work directly for Lockheed Martin. He owned the company Access Graphics, which was associated with Lockheed Martin. But there was also the pageantry from Patsy, John Ramsey's wife, and the fact that she had cancer. So you have this sort of interplay between this massive company and lots of money, and then pageantry, and then cancer. And it's pageantry also from companies and lawyers and the media. Sometimes the media are unknowingly caught up in the pageantry. And then you have things like Patsy's cancer, which reflect another kind of cancer, right? Then you have Scott Peterson, who was a failing fertilizer salesman. He was also selling things. Jodi Arias, who was a failing, also involved in sales and also involved in multi-level marketing. And sales seems to have something to do with fakery and fake people and two faces and two sides to a story and fairy tales and nightmares, right? But overall, the context of Rape of Cassandra was that during the sentencing hearing on November 19th, Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke said investigators still didn't know the exact sequence of events. So even when the discovery documents were released, even when we had all this information, we didn't necessarily have the answers. The answers still had to be figured out. And one of the key questions was, when did these murders happen and how did they happen? Because of the gruesome manner the bodies of his children were disposed of, investigators haven't been able to establish time of death either. Were the children killed before or after their mother? Rape of Cassandra, the ambit was to investigate the exact sequence of events from the time of the first death in the Watts home to the disposal at the Cervi site, to how and why a normal, in inverted commas, family man wreaked a holocaust against his own family and ultimately himself. The discovery documents reveal how Watts' story of the crime comes about. Eventually Watts is prompted, did Shanann do something? But even Watts' confession isn't reliable. In the moment that Chris Watts steps forward out of his quiet, introverted self and rises as the hero in his confession, Shanann falls as the villain, a convenient, symbolic, and of course cowardly distortion of the truth.